This note sheet, if this is something that you want to take a picture of or freeze and write down, it starts with the 3 R's. So if you look in the upper left corner, FDR's New Deal, the 3 R's are relief for the people in immediate need, recovery for the economy and businesses, and then reform so that this never happens anymore again to our economic institutions. And as we go through these programs, you're going to see that relief, recovery, reform, everything that he does fits into one or more of those categories. And he relies upon his brain trust. And those are a bunch of Ivy League professors and economists that he trusts to make decisions for him. And to be honest with you, he had a very diverse cabinet. First woman, Frances Perkins, and first Jewish cabinet member. But ultimately, it was his brain trust that he leaned on and his friends. So he does this fireside chat. The 21st Amendment is passed at this time. That's not on the sheet, but the Beer and Wine Revenue Act, which is a way to alcohol curb, let people end prohibition. It becomes that 21st Amendment so that they can tax beer and wine. And then he delivers these fireside chats, which make America feel good. And the most important thing I can tell you about Franklin Roosevelt is we are in a crisis that's been going on for 4 years. Unemployment reaches 25%. The gross national product is in half. The stock market has fallen really to about 12% of its value. And Franklin Roosevelt emerges to give people hope. And he makes people feel good. And there's something to be said for that. His confidence makes people feel good. Here's a guy that was stricken with polio that's in a wheelchair, and yet he's making people feel good given these chats. So he gets Congress on his side. Luckily, he's got the Democrats in charge of Congress with him. And everything to the first line is legislation within 100 days. So it makes you think of, aggressive congressional legislation within 100 days. First and foremost, the FDIC, which is Federal Deposit Insurance. And that is to protect, so that's what he explained with the Emergency Banking Relief Act of why he closed the banks. And that will protect a certain amount of money to a certain value that still exists today. He eloquently if you listen to the first fireside chat, he eloquently explained really in a way that the layman, the common man, would be able to understand why we need to keep our money in the banks and why the banking system is important. Next is the Homeowners Loan Corporation and the Farm Credit Administration, and both were to pay mortgages to keep people in their homes and their farms. FARA is the parent of FEMA, which is around still today. FEMA is doing a lot, did a lot with the coronavirus. And FARA is the Federal Emergency Relief Agency that's going to set up soup kitchens and allocate money into different towns and cities all across America to try to provide immediate relief of those 3 R's. The PWA, the Public Works. Each time that you see the word works, you know that it is a program that puts people to work. It had put unemployed people to work for the government, build dams and bridges and roads. The Civilian Conservation Corps was young teen boys doing outdoors projects. The Tennessee Valley Authority was the largest government electricity provider in the United States. And it was a very rural and impoverished part of Tennessee. It didn't really work long term, but it was an attempt to provide electrical power and run by the government. Then I put together the IRA or NRA, that's not the National Rifle Association, it's the National Industrial Recovery Act and the Agricultural Adjustment Act. One was for businesses, one is for farms, but both are the government, the government telling these companies or these farms price control and wage control. And one company or one actual business, the Schechter Poultry Company sued the United States, and in 1935 they won. The NRA was stricken as unconstitutional, and so that made FDR really mad, and that led at the very bottom to the court packing scheme, where FDR, for the first time really is criticized for being a little too big for his britches. I'm going to show you some political cartoons here and zoom in on them about his court packing plan. And one of them is, all of these yes, yes, yes. He wants them all to go along with him. He picks 6 justices to sit alongside the 6 oldest justices. So you're going to see on a regent's exam a political cartoon that deals with him trying to pack the court. Here's a very famous one where FDR, just trying to zoom in so you can get a good clear picture, FDR is dragging a drunk Congress along with him, and he's trying to get the Supreme Court, who's turned their back on him, to come along with him. Okay? So that's a result. The court packing scheme was his being upset about the NRA and the Schechter decision. It never happened. It's the first time Congress said no. Okay? I drew that line there because that's the end of the aggressive first 100 days. And within the next 2 years, you're going to see some other New Deal programs that are significant. One is the Civil Works Administration, which is high-paying government construction jobs. It didn't really last long. The Security and Exchange Act, which is the Security and Exchange Commission, which regulates the stock market even today. And that's because of margin buying and some improper things at the time. And that's a part of, in the 3 R's, reform. And then you've got the Federal Housing Administration, which is how my wife and I actually were able to not put money down and get our first mortgage when we bought our house 12 years ago. And that was a real blessing for us. And it's just a government agency that enables people to get mortgages and helps regulate the mortgage business. So that's all the first New Deal it's called. Now, I wrote on the side, John Steinbeck, The Grapes of Wrath. That is a book about the Dust Bowl. Sadly, there was a drought in the Great Plains and out toward Oklahoma and Kansas in that region, and we see what we call a dust bowl, where things dry out, and that novel is very famous. So there's people suffering all around the country, not just on Wall Street, not just in Middle America, but even people in Middle America, or even people out toward the West, and that novel is about that. The second phase of the New Deal has the biggest program of them all, the Works Progress Administration, run by his good friend Harry Hopkins, and it was 3 million actors were paid to act and make movies, and they made some great movies in this era. Musicians to write music, artists to paint murals, roads and bridges, and it put so many people to work for the government. It was a very large program. The Resettlement Act was for poor sharecroppers. The Wagner Act, or the National Labor Relations Board, was set up to help unions and to help workers. It was definitely an anti-laissez-faire, much more a swing from the 1920s and Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover, a swing toward helping the workers. They used taxes, federal taxes, to pay for the New Deal in part in the second phase because, to be honest, in 1937, we see another economic dip. Okay? Now, the REA electrified a lot of rural America, and the most important of all the New Deal plans that's still around was a payroll deduction for the elderly and the disabled, as it is now, called the Social Security Act, which you get a certain percentage of your paycheck comes out, and it's sort of a forced retirement where the government holds the money, well, theoretically holds the money. The trouble is nowadays that people in 2020 are living a lot longer than they were when this was initiated in 1935, 36, 37. So that's tough. Now, there's opponents of the New Deal. There's some critics. Liberals thought that it was not enough, that he didn't do enough for African Americans, that he didn't do enough programs to help, that it didn't actually fix the New Deal. So he can't please everyone. He did win the 1936 election against a man named Alf Landon very handily. But nevertheless, there are opponents. Conservatives thought that it was too much socialism, that it was too much government. And then there's some demagogues. I wrote one down. Dr. Townsend is the man whose idea was Social Security and the Social Security Act. And, we'll stop right there. And that'll be it for the New Deal talk. 10 minutes short about FDR's New Deal. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, APUSH kids, and take care.